Hi everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm part of the Croissant team. I'm joining from sunny UK at the moment. It's really lovely to have you all here today. I'm excited to introduce Zoltan Szalas from Croissant, who's our CEO and co-founder, as well as Matt Roberts, who's the co-founder of Happy Operators. Over the next 30 minutes or so, 25, 30 minutes, Zoltan and Matt are going to discuss how AI and automation are reshaping workplace operations. We'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So if there's any questions that come up throughout the recording, please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best to pick them up at the end. So the session is being recorded and we'll share it with you later. Zoltan, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. Matt, so great to have you on. Really excited about this one because there's a lot of talk about AI in the workplace, where it fits in, what is the landscape looking like? There's so many things going on, so I'm very excited to have this conversation over the next 20 minutes. But I'd love to hear a little bit about you and like your experience and how did you become involved as with being known for, your work with some of the Claude stuff and then just getting involved in AI.
Well, yeah, it was quite a fun journey to hear. I mean, I'm a history graduate. I don't know, generalist, not technical really, but when I moved to London, I fell into marketing, realized I enjoyed building products or certainly more on the technical side. So, 10, 15 years later, I've ended up running Happy Operators, where we do primarily education, but also, products for ourselves and then client work, building with automation and AI technology. It's a bit of a fun journey. And I think that's one of the benefits now in this kind of agentic AI world that we live in, being able to not being too set in stone in terms of what you're doing, is actually a benefit now. History or I don't know, humanities maybe that may have been the right decision 15 years ago rather than computer science because you need to be able to understand all the nuances around all the technologies and being able to communicate effectively in a kind of natural language is actually becoming a superpower. So yeah, fun journey.
Yeah, very, very cool. So kind of like let's start at the basics, right? Like let's kind of start where a lot of people that are watching this webinar right now might be thinking like, okay, this is great, but like so give me the basics, like, how does it like somebody that you work with, a company or something, like how do they start using AI? Like is it just do you just give it to all the employees and see you later, or is it, like talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I would start with there is no silver bullet. There's two things happening at the moment. One is employees are doing it anyway, without you
Mm.
knowing. Shadow IT or whatever you want to call it, is a real thing. And there's two ways you can kind of respond to that. One is you can kind of disincentivize that, or you can accept actually the technology is powerful, um, and it's driving real business value, and so let's give them the ability to do it within our ecosystem rather than outside the ecosystem. So that's actually that does take some high, like top level acceptance of maybe there's some risk, but humans are smart. We'll work out what's going to get allow me to get my work done. And if it's not about trying to fire people. It's more about let's do the more important things, such as strategy, creativity, um, trying to find ways of working better together rather than the admin. One of the good places to start that I've found is let's go to your calendar. Really simple stuff. Take a screenshot. Give it to, if you've got Copilot or, Claude, ideally, you'd have some of the seriously frontier models, but, even Microsoft's Copilot is now becoming really powerful, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And get AI to ask you questions. So rather than thinking you need to have the answers, It's definitely now where give it the context. And when I say context, it's just information that you would think would be useful to have the question answered. Like you were hiring an intern or a new employee, you wouldn't say, "Can you just start your job now?" And then they would know what to do. No, you'd say, "Okay, well, okay, as a company, this is what we do. As a team, we do this. And as on my job, I normally look at these three or four things to get this task done." You talk
Mm.
to AI in the same way. It responds in English or primarily English at the moment anyway, very well. But the context that you give it really matters. So, don't give it a crappy piece of process that doesn't work. Try and be very clear about what works and what doesn't work. So that's a super easy way to start. Take a screenshot of your calendar, ask AI to like, look at it and say, what on here do you think we could apply AI to? Or two, get it to ask you questions. Like a real the technology is moving really fast. So, like 6 months ago, prompting was like, oh my God, you've got to be a prompt engineer. Now that's actually becoming less important because the models themselves have embedded within them have got smarter, and so they're already doing some pre-prompting. So it's like it knows what to do. Now it's what information you're giving me. Hence the context. So it's the key thing is not to be scared by it and see it as a tool or an assistant or a sidekick for you rather than working against you. That's
Got it. Got it. That's good. That's
my
very, very helpful. And is it, so like a lot of our audience are, chief of staffs, HR, and probably some people sitting in finance. So, if I'm in HR, like how do what is maybe sort of like initial functions or initial things that I may want to bring in for my employees, right? Like if I'm trying to set up an L&D program or something like that. Like what is that sort of like that initial step? Like I think from a personal use case you talked about the calendar, but what does that version look like for like an organization?
well, I can tell you how we're doing a project at the moment. And the way we're approaching it is a bit of leadership. Like, first of all, it's like, how do you get leadership involved? Like, are they ready to try and rethink how to do work? So, the from the CEO, COO, HR director, a couple of other roles, we're going like as a team, the aim is let's all get in a room and you're actually looking at it from a business case or a work processes case. We'll just have a conversation. The good thing is use AI in that process. Get your transcriber. I don't know what transcriber you use. I'm not going to try and promote any specific one. Have that running in the background. Don't stress about having to remember anything. And we'll just talk about how you're doing your work right now. From that, it might actually end up being some practical things. Like very recently, just we jumped on a call to on an individual level, but she was the HR director. It was actually just explaining the features inside the tools that they already have. It does not have to be complicated. So, for example, with Microsoft, it was, hey, you use Microsoft Teams. Okay, what are the features in here that we can start to pull from different meetings you're having? Can we pull those into the Teams channels so you can get a bit of insight into what the other teams are doing? So, I mean, I'm naturally a bit more practical or tactical, let's say, than overall big strategic moves. But the feedback I'm getting from peers who are also doing the same, you need to provide value early on. Like if
Mhm.
you don't find the use cases or it doesn't work once or two times, people get frustrated and turned off by the technology. So it's actually a high value task to go into the teams or go into your team that you have, list out the use cases, find the small wins, go and try and solve those small wins, and then try and pick up the big wins. Because let's say a big win might be estimating projects. That's a big
Yeah.
everyone's got that same problem. But
We're always
multiple
trying to estimate engineering
yeah.
capacity.
If it's not estimating like construction, for example, a company's
Right.
construction. So it's like they've got so many inputs to this estimation process, they've got so many spreadsheets trying to come in like and say, hey, AI is going to fix this problem, is not straightforward.
Yeah.
And it can go wrong in so many ways. And so we try and do a little bit of like get top level buy-in, like what's your team goals or what's your business goals, and try and upskill them enough that they're like, okay, now I can see it working for me personally, and then go into the teams from the bottom down with the same approach. But there is no silver bullet. Like another way of doing it is to run different types. I don't know if a colleague called it omni-channel, sounded more complicated. It actually just means do one-on-one sessions, do some workshops, do some hackathons, do different ways of be exposing people to the technology. Because if you just say use this and then don't give them time and space to learn it, then you need to give them the space to make mistakes, not being also hustled by a client, whilst also trying to learn how to apply AI. Give them
Yeah.
the physical space, the time space to, okay, for 3 hours today, hands don't have to do any client work or whatever the specific work is. Let's all try and build an internal solution based on the model that you have access to, and let's work it out together. Very much like that, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Interesting. And you mentioned something about leadership rethinking how to work. That was a very interesting thought. And I'm curious, like how do you, I mean, you know, how do you convince? Is it usually leadership that's sort of, I don't want to use the word blocker, but are sort of like the most resistant to that change of rethinking how to work, like, like the CEO, CFO, and going to them and being like, hey, we want to bring in AI and completely rethink how we work. Like, what is the reception of that when you come in and you kind of, lay out this big statement of like, let's rethink how we work and and put AI in.
Well, it's a valid point. I'm working it out how that actually works in practice because most of the stuff that we deal with, they've primarily come to us, or at least they've known, oh, okay, I can see what you're doing there. Can we kind of do something similar?
Yeah,
Um, if you're going in like one technique, because people are busy, especially when you're senior, and if
of
you
course.
start
Yeah,
trying to get them to change their behavior, like it's quite a big behavior change. For example, suddenly offloading quite a lot of work to an agent
yeah.
that to get them to just do that, it's hard for
And
me,
trust.
even.
Yeah,
Yeah, to
yeah.
trust that this system's going to work. So one thing we have started doing, which it's about 30 days worth. Well, one, can they trust it too? The technology is changing in real time. What
Mm.
we thought was good a month ago or predictable is less predictable because the next one's coming along. And so I think you need a leader who gets that, recognizes, okay, as long as we're on see the business value behind the ultimate outcome, and it's not destroying my day. Um, let's roll with it. Let's kind of thing. So, um, one way of doing is kind of shadowing. So, like, you're not trying to get them to like you're doing this task and now change it now. It's more okay. Let us just be alongside you and follow your process, and then over time we'll kind of make tweaks and add AI along that process. That's what I'm finding as a bit more because you can just jump on a call and say, okay, I'm going to do this thing today, so let me just sit in the background and watch you do it. And then they don't really have to change their behavior from the word go. So I find that's interesting from like a way to ultimately sell the solution, but it's more of like we'll find this way together because
Yeah.
um it's generative AI as well. It's inherently slightly unpredictable. So and everyone's
Yeah.
use case is slightly different. So
Uh,
it's
and again,
tricky.
I'm curious. So if if how do you measure the ROI on that? So for example, you kick off a project, you go through the process, and then 6 months later, the CEO or whoever's the lead on it comes back and says, "Hey, Matt, how are we doing?"
Yeah, well, it's again tricky. You need to try and build in some metrics at the beginning.
Mm,
Some if you have the data, great. Say, we have a backlog of estimations. We know they take this long. At least you have some benchmark to work against.
hmm
There's a metric that I'm not even sure if it's a good metric, but it shows adoption, but I don't know if it shows um let's call them performance, which is token usage. Because one of the questions you have is how well are my employees enabled? Like, sure, they're burning through tokens, but I don't know if that's actually moving the needle. But I know that metric is used and at least indicates something. Because one of the Worst things, I mean, Microsoft, it just happened, didn't it? They just killed their contract, I think, with Claude because they burnt through a whole year's worth of
Yeah.
tokens in 5 months.
Token
Or
usage
you have the
sounds like
opposite.
token usage sounds like a nice metric we've been sold on by the AI companies, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, it looks like you're going to have to upgrade. Like, thanks.
Yeah. Use more
Um,
tokens. Yeah.
exactly. Or there's the opposite, where you deploy the tools so your employees can use it, and then they don't use it, and so
Mm.
you're struggling really on both sides. Like the adoption problem is real, and I think that's um often the case if the models aren't great. So 4.6, Claude 4.6, one of or now 4.7, but that around December time, the quality of the LLM or the model, the AI, whatever way you want to say it, improved to the point where it was better at getting the job done than previously. But before that, certainly in some other ecosystems, if it didn't give you the right answer two or three or four times, you just switch off. And then
Yeah.
trying to get your employees to come back and try again. And it's like trying to build a culture really of testing, of iterating, of sharing. That's actually
Yeah.
the big problem that you've got to solve rather than just saying, hey, let's just slap on AI here because, it's that's been that problem has been there all the time. It's not AI, so let's slap on automation. Let's slap on this and we'll fix the problem. Actually, it's more complex than that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that, I have really really taken advantage of, and I'm curious how you think about scaling this across organization, but really sort of using Cloud Cowork as sort of almost like the brain for operations. So like, we'll hook HubSpot CRM up there, we'll hook Linear, we'll hook up Zep Cloud for memory for sales conversations, we'll hook up Apollo for like we hook up all these different data sources that are related to different parts of the company, and then it sort of starts to connect the dots. I'm curious, like, what would be your advice if I wanted to give that to all of my employees? Like, what kind of controls or like, how would you go about it? How would you advise me about thinking about that if I wanted to say, like, hey, I have a company brain and I'm going to give that to all the employees because it's going to speed up analysis, it's going to speed up cadence, it's just going to speed up everything. What would be your guidance around that?
My guidance would probably be, well, what's your it'd be a question to yourself. What's your risk profile in the sense, are you if you are a company that's more transparent versus less transparent,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what are the risks? Those SaaS tools that you're talking about, if as long as they are authenticated for their own personal account, so they don't get any more data than they would do normally. What you're actually giving them now is superpower really to try and connect those dots for
Yeah.
themselves because they're my in like before AI, if the closer to the problem you are, the more chance of succeeding in trying to solve it. And so I've done client consultancy work for years, and you're trying to re-engineer or like what is your problem? They know it very clear. And
Yeah.
clearly, if you can give them the ability to work through that problem themselves at scale, you can solve problems a lot faster. I know the Shopify CEO, he's a big advocate we just deployed. I mean, Shopify is a on the cutting edge, I think, anyway, in terms of technology, but still, they deployed an agent that was testing, let's call it. It wasn't fully ready, but they basically said from the outset, you cannot talk to this agent individually. You can only talk about it in public chat groups. And so there's two ways of learning. You can do it yourself or you can observe. And that's a really observing
Interesting.
people trying to solve a problem and then like the expert who knows the weird system that exists over here and say, actually, the data sits over here. It's kind of weird, but anyway, that's how we've done it for 20 years. So they respond to the agent inside. And so this is where it's a bit different when it comes to when you're living in Claude at the moment, in Claude Cowork, that's personal. That's your Claude Cowork.
Yeah.
If you then bring that same brain type thinking into Slack or Microsoft Teams, and suddenly everyone can see it happening in real time, training can actually, or the education thing can move really fast because suddenly you've got
Mm.
multiple people publicly training the model or showing them how they think about solving a problem. Which is an interesting thing that I read yesterday. I was like, and I'm trying it with one client now, smaller, like agency. So they're very much nimble and they can do it. I said, look, we've got our the cases are content, um, design, operations. I said, right, let's talk to Steve. It's called Steve. And I want everyone to talk to it and us to all observe it. And then I can also keep a check on it. There is
Yeah.
okay, shouldn't have done that. Oh, we need to fix that. But that way you can kind of get more information quicker. That's kind of an experiment I'm running at the moment.
That's very cool. Yeah. And I'm curious, so for the HR leaders and for, the chief of staffs listening, there I think all of this stuff is amazing, but then from an employee perspective, there is probably a lot of anxiety about like, oh, they're bringing this thing in. It's going to take my job. Like how do you educate or how do you coach your clients or what is your advice to those HR leaders, the chief of staffs that are kind of dealing with? I mean, we just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who, bigger 100,000 person company, and they're a little bit hesitant to bring in AI because it's also causing what they notice is it's also causing a lot of anxiety around employees, right? So it's like this balance of innovation versus, mental health. So I'm curious, like, how do you think about that, or how do you advise your clients to think about that?
One of the things I do suggest is show, not tell. If you can show that it's working for yourself personally as a leader and showing it in a way that's this is just dealing with the stuff. I don't want to keep checking my emails. We all get 1,000 emails a day. Now it means I only have to check 3 times a day. It services the important ones, and here's why I can now have a good conversation with you over a coffee rather than looking at the emails. I think there's definitely a show thing because if you just say you need to use it, sure, people are like, well, go on then, prove it. So that's a good place to start. And see it as not an existential threat, but as a company, it's a company problem. It's like,
Right.
hey, we all have to re-engineer what we think our role is. We're trying to give you as much chance as you can to do it. There's a case that, if I was working in a company, and they were giving you the space to learn. Again, I go back to that other point. See it as like, look, we all have to upskill here, and we're not going to try and say do it in your spare time. No, it's on the company's watch, and we're learning with you all the way. So I would probably start there,
Yeah.
but definitely show and not tell. And if the
That's a
leaders
really
can't keep
interesting,
up,
yeah. You brought up a really interesting point because, there's a part where, the employee has to take ownership and say, okay, this thing is coming. In your words, I'm going to re-engineer what my role is. Are you seeing like what type of roles are you seeing getting completely re-engineered and like what type of roles are you starting to see come into existence that didn't exist before? Prompt engineer aside.
yeah.
But
I do think this. I mean, yeah, I used engineer. I mean, that's maybe an engineer. It's like rethink. I could have easily said, but it's
right.
um, if you and look, I'm also learning this. Like, how do you rethink to think about a task? Because a lot of tasks we do at work, they're a product of some busy work that meant, oh, I'm just doing that thing. But if you had to look like what's the actual outcome I'm seeking to do here? We're seeking to close this deal, or I'm seeking to I don't know, create this, have a great client call. That's ultimately the point of this task. It doesn't, but we've layered in all these tasks that you need to do. So trying to re-engineer your role, I'm saying, okay, what's the point of me being here? Is it to try and find value, or be as valuable as possible? Um, and it might mean that in real time you're kind of creating work for yourself because in the short term, it might not feel like it, but I think in the long term, the whole what it means for a job role will have to change. I'm trying to think of good examples. Like designers is a great example. Suddenly, suddenly your job as prototyping exclusively. Oh, I'm just building slide decks. Actually, no, you need to build more or less an app that's ready for production before it gets to the engineer. And the engineer's job is how does this fit into our overall system at scale? But there's so much more because to write the code itself is not really your problem anymore. It's about can you give it the taste and your thinking to produce the user interface or the application. And so designers certainly have to move up the river or the stream to be shipping code versus like shipping Figmas. That's a classic one. The knowledge work case is a bit slower, but I think is happening. Trying to think of a good example. Like for example, in sales, I've definitely seen, you know, go-to-market engineer. I mean, they say engineer, it
Mhm.
basically means if you can wrap your head around this technology, um, we we need you because
Yeah.
um, there's like two things. One, can you understand if these multiple tools need to be working together? Even though you might be a salesperson, the amount of people we might require to do that function is less because we can use AI to do it. But suddenly we've created all these other new roles because we've created more
Yeah.
growth. And so I'm very optimistic about the job market, but it's like it's just it'll take some time for those new jobs to
Yeah.
surface. But they'll probably be definitely more technical focused, I think.
There's an implication in something that you said a little bit, a couple of sentences ago about rethinking your job as an employee and the tasks are going to be done for you and really thinking about sort of like what your objective is. It almost sounds like employees that are going to succeed are going to have to become sort of outcome based as opposed to task based. Because if we assume that like AI is going to do all the most of the tasks for us, and especially like these little things in between, then you kind of have to focus on the outcome, which is like, hey, I need to get this deal done, right? So kind of focusing as opposed to doing the research, going through the transcript and understanding, you almost like have to sort of rethink about like how do I add value to drive this outcome? So in our case, like closing that deal, right?
Yep. No, and I also think that's quite a healthy way. When I have worked in companies, rather than like owning the company, it's sometimes you get frustrated when you're like, this is what am I being judged on? Like if I'm just being judged
Yeah.
on like busy work, then after a while you get frustrated. And maybe that's why I didn't like having the job, but whereas if it's quite clear, it's like I mean I'd love it, and this doesn't happen in organizations that often. If you can somehow define what the outcome is and how what the count of that outcome is. Look, if you get it all done in 4 hours, you know, take a longer lunch break. But I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky when like okay,
Yeah.
I know the AI can now do it in 1 hour, so I'm living the dream. So I don't think that's going to work in theory, but sorry, practice. But um, people should be incentivized to find the best way or the best solution to solve the problem, and then find the next interesting problem to solve.
Yeah.
I think we are like bees, we just or ants, let's call it. We like to keep ourselves busy solving problems, just letting people do it.
Yeah. Matt, I think Victoria's back on. That's our cue. Before we jump into Q&A, three resources where HR leaders, chief of staffs, leaders can go and educate themselves on AI, how to bring it into the organization. What are three resources that you'd recommend?
All right, okay, you're killing me now. Plug happyoperators.com. Might as well. The second one would be bringing it into an organization. There is a good um, YouTube generally. I know it sounds a bit bad, but YouTube as a learning resource, there are people on YouTube who, if you search HR and AI, you will find people who are producing content that's very relevant to that role. And then the third one is, let me think. Look inside. Um, I'll come back to the third one. I'm trying to think. I remember seeing
Anybody
it a
anybody
while ago.
specific on YouTube people should look
Yeah,
up
let
or
me
follow?
think. I mean, not quite a competitor, but I'm going to give them a plug anyway. 9X, they do a lot of work, trying to find on more kind of real workplace type training. So they're good. Or happyoperators.com.
Happy operators indeed. All right, Victoria, this is our cue for Q&A, right?
It is, it is. Thanks so much for such a brilliant discussion and for sort of taking the mystery out of AI and the fear out of AI. I love what you said about rethinking the job role and not sort of being scared of it and not so worried about it. I think that's fantastic. So a few questions that have come in, and I'll let you guys decide how you want to take them. How does AI bring teams together, particularly those that may be working remotely or based in different locations? How can we use AI for that?
Do you want me to go? All right. So, how can we use AI for that? I mean, one thing that if you have the ability to do it in the sense that the company allows it, or personally, you can vibe code fun things to do. So, for example, you could vibe code a game that you can play collaboratively, or quizzes. You can really have fun with generative AI. And if you're not technical, it really doesn't matter. And I think when people start building their own things for themselves, rather than saying, "Hey, I found this tool over here that does X," you get so much more buy-in. And so I found that been a great way, especially if you have. I like fun things, GIFs. Like if you can bring in some funny things, dogs. It will 100% bring people together who are distributed.
Oh, brilliant. And what are some of the easiest kind of workplace operation processes to automate first for companies that are just sort of dipping their toe in and trying to start, um, to automate things with AI?
I mean, number one, transcribing calls. I don't know if people still don't do that. Before this call, I was on a call and they don't transcribe calls. And their number one complaint was, yeah, we don't take meeting. We won't remember what we said in the meetings, and we don't take notes. So it's like, well, transcribe the call then. They're like, yeah, we could do that. That's it. And then with that transcript, you can do so much. Send data to your CRM, or send data to your project management system, or just send the results or the summary of the call to your Teams chat or Slack chat. Really simple stuff, but suddenly people who are either not on that call, so for whatever reason distributed, they will see the results. And over time they'll get used to the habit of like, okay, as long as I know if I don't make that call, it's not put loads of pressure on someone else to write good notes and write good meeting notes, and I know I'll be kept up to date. That's a really simple one, and it's a click of a button. Or, the person who pays to upgrade the plan to allow transcription. But I think it's a big unlock when that happens.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. A question here for Zoltan. Can you talk a little bit about how we use AI here at Croissant?
Ha. Great question. We use it in a lot of different ways. So we use it in our go-to-market motions. I was talking to Matt earlier. We have essentially an operational brain where we connect all the different resources from engineering tickets to CRM tickets, transcribing sales conversations and plugging those in. That's one. We also have a sales brain that's just purely dedicated to a couple of things like identifying ICPs, identifying objections, and the point there is to like collect as many transcripts as possible so that brain at some point we can just say, hey, here is a persona, here's how big they are, here is who they are, here is a company, and it'll just give a list of objections to look out for, maybe a couple of different angles and wedges. So that's a couple of them. On the engineering side, I mean, we use it very aggressively. We use Cloud Code for development. We also use it on the operational side for maintaining our listings. So we have a lot of different use cases that we use it for. Yeah, so we're very, pro AI. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Question. Oh, this is two questions in one for Matt. How can we keep connected with you, and how long does it take a company to implement AI on average, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm going to say on average. It depends on how big you are, obviously. I tend to not work in big enterprise. That's a whole different beast, I think. Um, but it doesn't take long because implementing AI. If you can get people, using it daily, for me, that's a win. Even if it's, just making sure that you're and giving them the right tools, say ChatGPT or Claude or something that can do the work properly. Weeks. It spreads like wildfire. I mean, look, we saw it with ChatGPT. Once they realized what it could do, it was the most popular app. And then I think every app since then has been the most popular app, and it's been AI related. To find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Matt Matt J. Roberts, or LinkedIn, Matt.Roberts, or happyoperators.com, and you'll find me and my little team there. We're always happy to chat.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And we'll finish off with a bit of a quick fire, kind of off the top of your head question for each of you. Matt, you can go first. What is your prediction of AI implementation at remote companies for 2027?
My prediction is that they will be red pilled, and everyone will be an engineer.
Wow, big prediction. How about you, Zoltan?
That's a great question. My prediction is for remote companies is that as it relates to AI is I wouldn't go as far as to say that everyone's going to be an engineer, but my prediction is that in 2027 it is going to be a mandatory skill, like a benchmark, that like if you're not if you're not, if if you're not using AI regularly in your work, then I think it's probably going to be a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's a bit like
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
willing to use email or something.
Exactly, right.
I'll scratch mine from engineer to builder. My point being is we're gonna have to
Yeah,
start building things with the tools,
yeah,
like
yeah,
because that mindset, because
yeah.
you will have to adapt to the
Yeah.
to what it can do for you.
Yeah.
So
Like I think
building
people are gonna have to familiarize themselves more on like how APIs work, how do you connect systems, maybe, and things of that nature.
to some
Or is
extent.
that too much?
To some extent, I think they'll just move things, oh, I'll just install a plugin. Okay, and that's
Yeah,
really all
it's
you've
true.
done. You don't really have to think too much about the API bit. It's just knowing, oh, I've got this system over here, I've got this system over
Yeah,
here. How can I make them work together? And what am I building? Oh, I'm building a process to do X. Suddenly you don't need IT to do that. It's like, great,
yeah,
let
it's a
me
good
see what I
point.
do.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, we'll come back to you next year and see how close you both were
it's on the
on your
record. It's
predictions.
on the record.
Yeah, there we go. It's recorded. Anyway, a huge thank you to you both for taking the time for coming on to have a chat with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone as well who signed on and had a listen. If there's some additional questions that have come up that we haven't had time to answer today, please do send them in. You can book a call with our team. There'll be a link in the chat to do so. We'd love to see you at our next webinar in a couple of weeks' time. Head to our Luma page. There'll be a link there for that for more information. Thank you so much. Take care.